In the 15th century, accumulating wealth meant securing it in heavy iron chests. If you wanted to do business across Europe, you had to physically transport your assets across a continent fractured by local wars and plagued by bandits. Imagine trying to fund an international trade empire when every transaction required carting bags of gold florins, like the one you see here, over thousands of miles of dangerous medieval roads. It was slow, expensive, and incredibly risky. But there was an even larger obstacle than highway robbery: eternal damnation. The Catholic Church strictly banned usury. Charging even a fraction of a % of interest on a loan was considered a mortal sin, punishable by excommunication. To build a truly global enterprise, ambitious merchants needed a way to move immense value without actually moving physical gold, and they needed a way to generate a return on their capital without triggering the wrath of the Church. This brings us to Giovanni de Bicci de Medici. While other dynasties of the era rose to power through military conquest, Giovanni built his family's empire using a much quieter weapon: advanced accounting. This 15th century ledger reveals double-entry bookkeeping. Every transaction is recorded twice: debit and credit. Assets equal liabilities plus equity. Skimmed funds immediately create visible discrepancies. By standardizing this mathematical rigor across their entire operation, the Medici turned routine bookkeeping into a surveillance tool. It allowed them to track and manage wealth across vast distances with absolute authority. To expand this surveillance network without taking on fatal risk, the Medici Bank was structured not as a single corporation, but as a holding company. Florence acted as the central hub, linked to legally independent partnerships in cities like London, Bruges, and Rome. The parent company in Florence always held the lion's share of equity in each branch, but local managers were given operational control. Crucially, these local managers were legally responsible for their own branch's liabilities. If the London branch were to collapse under toxic debt, that specific partnership could be legally severed and liquidated. The contagion would stop there. By trapping risk within these isolated legal silos, the Medici could aggressively expand their operations into hostile territories, knowing their core family wealth in Florence remained protected from total ruin. But how did they actually move that wealth and profit from it without violating the Church's ban on interest? They used an instrument tied directly to the delays of maritime trade, like the merchant ship shown here, called the Bill of Exchange. A bill of exchange was a decentralized payment order. A merchant, the drawer, issues a written order to a banker, the drawee, in another city, instructing them to pay a third party. Because delivering this payment took time, the Medici embedded a hidden margin into the exchange rate. They argued this margin wasn't interest on a loan, but simply compensation for the risk of currency fluctuation over time. The Church accepted the loophole. They coupled this with the letter of credit, which substituted the bank's pristine reputation for an unknown buyer's credit. Suddenly, the piece of paper itself held intrinsic value. It became a negotiable instrument, traded and sold before the physical goods ever arrived. By decoupling economic value from heavy physical coins and cloaking their profit inside complex currency exchanges, the Medici engineered what was effectively an unregulated private fiat currency. This system propelled the Medici to the absolute summit of European society. As you look at this stone family crest, it's easy to see the permanence they projected. They became the personal bankers to the Pope, monopolizing the European alum cartel and elevating themselves from merchants to aristocrats. Yet, beneath that imposing stone facade lay a severe mathematical vulnerability. To maximize their profits, the bank practiced an extreme form of fractional reserve banking. While they held massive amounts of wealth on paper, historical ledgers show that the Medici frequently kept less than 5% of their total client deposits on hand in physical liquid reserves. The rest was tied up in long-term loans and illiquid cargo. This ratio created a razor-thin margin for error. If rumors of insolvency spread and depositors panicked, demanding their cash all at once, the requests would instantly outstrip the bank's physical reserves. The exact mechanism that allowed them to grow their empire at such staggering speeds, leveraging paper debt against a tiny fraction of hard assets, mathematically guaranteed their fragility. A single systemic shock could bring the entire structure down. That shock began taking shape under Lorenzo the Magnificent. While Lorenzo was a brilliant patron of the arts, he neglected the bank. Without strict oversight, local managers in northern branches like Bruges, seen here, and London engaged in reckless lending to secure political favor. In London, the local manager loaned massive, unbacked sums to King Edward IV. The goal was to secure lucrative export licenses for high-value English wool, which the Florentine textile industry desperately needed. But lending to a monarch is inherently toxic. When the Wars of the Roses threw the English economy into chaos, Edward simply stopped paying. The Medici Bank possessed no legal mechanism, and certainly no army, to seize collateral from a sovereign king. The massive default in London, combined with similar losses across the network, triggered a chain reaction. By 1494, the political and financial pressure reached a breaking point. The Medici were exiled, their branches were liquidated, and the central bank in Florence went up in flames at the hands of angry mobs. Every modern financial crisis caused by an over-leveraged bank or a defaulted sovereign loan shares its DNA with the Medici collapse. They proved that while clever accounting can circumvent the laws of man and God, no amount of financial engineering can outrun the brutal mathematics of risk.